Hello and welcome to the Mehzinho channel. This is an analysis of a slow game between MoiRon, who is playing white, against Mehzinho, who is playing black. MoiRon plays for the team Go With The Flow, and he plays against Mehzinho, as mentioned, who plays for Rookie8. This is a tournament setting in a 45-minute plus 45-second increment that is played in the Lichess 45 league. Okay, we're going to start with the game, and MoiRon plays f4, e5, and after f takes, what I understand from this type of opening, which is actually the bird, similar to King's Gambit, I would say, is that the idea is to take control of the f file with rook. Place your knight on f3, where the knight has control over the d4 and e5 square, and also defensive control of h4 as well. I play d6. After knight f3 takes, we get e4, bishop to c5, which is cutting straight into the king's position. It's preventing castling for now, and will do so for as long as I can. And it is cementing control of the d4 square to try to keep white back from playing a liberating d4 anywhere in the game. Then bishop to c4 is actually interesting. We actually walk into this later in the line. Haven't seen this before in over-the-board games, or I haven't encountered it in online games either. But yeah, it seems to be a solid move. Knight to c6, d3, knight to f6, and now knight to g5. Bishop to g5. After bishop g5, now actually comes the point from knight c4 into place, because h6, kicking the bishop, and now the bishop back to h4. Now I thought I could not really play the move g5. Would the bishop be on the inside, and would the move on the inside of the pawn chain, so on e2 or still on f1 with the knight on c3, then after bishop to g3, I would certainly have played knight to h5. Point is that after bishop takes and bishop takes, this would not be that big of a deal. Now we have the bishop on c4 and the knight on e5 also attacking the f7 square together, aside of the fact that the queen is attacking my h5 knight. So after a move like queen to d4 and queen takes h5, black cannot handle the attackers on the f7 pawn in a proper manner. Whilst with the bishop again in the inside of the pawn structure, I could just take the knight on e5 and have a superior, well, perhaps not superior, but for sure nice game here with black. So that is at least why I thought I couldn't play g5. So I played the move bishop to g4 instead. And after knight c3, queen d6, white came with bishop to b5. Perhaps looks aggressive, but I'm actually not so confident of the use of that move. The knight will clearly be kicked back later. Yes, you tickle the queen and also the c7 pawn, but I'm not so afraid of playing queen d7 and trading my bishop for your knight on my knight, not my bishop, trading my knight for your bishop on h4, which is what happens. So if you look at the position now, you might argue that black has a bit of a damaged pawn structure, which might be true, but I can see the potential of play on the half-open line, half-open file, the half-open G file. God, let me take a sip of water. Yeah, that's better. And honestly, it's not that bad, the pawn structure. It is supporting e6. You can play potentially f5 later. So I'm kind of okay. Note that after h3, I actually thought for a second of keeping the pin with bishop to h5. But, well, it's both not principle and also not possible tactically, because bishop h5 is actually just a blunder. You get knight takes e5. And yeah, it's just owl after bishop takes, knight takes, king takes, rook takes. It's just white who's playing for the win here, and I think I wouldn't even know how to handle this with black, because now your pawn structure is clearly weak. You're a pawn down, and good luck. So the only move here is well, perhaps you could take the knight, but it's clearly a better move is bishop to e6. And it actually surprised me that white took my bishop. I didn't mind at all, because this pawn structure is even is clearly better. It supports e6 now, supports future f5. White plays queen to d2, a6, kicking the knight first. And after the knight moves back, there we get our f5. And the idea of f5 is actually quite well, I would say quite simplistic, because after e takes and e takes, this structure is not bad for black at all. I'm going to castle. I have clearly space advantage. I have the half open file. I'm going to play in the center and or on the king side and launch an attack on that side. And I don't see much counterplay. White would need to try to disrupt my center for sure. If you don't take in this position, I'll push my pawn and have a very strong pawn on f4, which might be very annoying. Also note that I really cannot wait, in my opinion. I cannot first castle. If I castle here, I thought for that, but then I'm afraid that white will play g4 instantly, stopping my idea of f5. And yeah, well, first of all, you can see that I can still play f5, but it will not be as annoying since white has very strong control and will just take twice in that hole. Now I have the counter idea of playing h5 in this position, but after castles takes, the position I'm left with, although it's not bad for black, I wouldn't say it's bad for black, but it's clearly inferior to the position I calculated, where I push the f-pawn before castling. So that's why f5 now, because otherwise I'm afraid g4 will come. White actually castled, decided not to take the pawn, and yeah, then we get f4. So it's beautiful place there. Also, white plays king b1 clearly because of the threat of the bishop attacking here on e3, pinning the queen and the king. So we need to do something about that. I also play bishop to e3 now, and I'm actually not that happy with that move. Yes, the bishop is strong on e3, and it's totally a good position for black. But honestly, I don't think it was needed yet. I can play bishop e3 at a later moment if I still want to. There's no need to rush that. And it doesn't do much for my position. It would have been better to castle now, as it clearly improves my position. It adds pressure on the d-file as well. So yeah, that was a bit of an oversight, a bit too eager to jump into the hole, and a bit too happy that I was allowed to put to get f4 in, I guess. Queen to e1. Now we castle, and g4, also interesting. I think it's an okay move. It is clear that you don't want to get play on the g file against you, and you might be very cramped, and you might be afraid to lose that pawn even. So from that perspective, playing g4 absolutely frees up some space. On the other hand, the f4 pawn that I was already very happy with, it's now a protected pass pawn, so it's really beautiful. And yeah, I am not sure what the idea for white should have been in this position. So I think c4 is actually good, but it does not come with a downside for white. Queen d6, knight to d2, and now we come with b5 with the idea of a pawn attack on the king, on the queen side, leaving not much for white to do here. Knight to b3. Yeah, and here, if I would play knight d4, you get knight to e2, and really, I don't think it's that good of an idea. Although it looks a nice square and it looks like you can undouble your pawns potentially, I really don't see the need for that. And the black knight is like a stallion. It's like a Frisian stallion that you really don't want to trade for one of the old inefficient. Well, I wouldn't say cripple, but not strong horses for white at all. So the move rook h7 is a much more flexible move. The idea of it is to potentially double on the d file. If I get to play an open attack, get open files or half open files on the A or B line, it can go there after the c pawn moves. Alternatively, if we do play in the future for an h5 push to launch an attack against on the g file or on the h file, then we can also double on the g file, or alternatively, if it happens on the h file as well. Now, in this position, I thought I had time to position my pieces, also because the counterplay for white is not very clear. I do think for sure that white should play on the king side. It's where it has the pawns, but it just doesn't seem to be quick enough. So after queen to h4, I think it's the proper idea, but it's just not quick enough. Idea of queen to f6 to g6, one of the most dangerous things perhaps that white can do. It doesn't look dangerous at all. It tickles the rook and it costs him 2 moves. Alternatively, perhaps you can play g5, but I wouldn't mind that at all, not in the slightest, since we can now double our rooks there and launch and enter the white position from that side as well. So we can continue with our plan of advancing on the king side, kicking the white knight back to an inferior position. And yeah, after we need to continue with the plan, in my opinion. Then after a5, the idea of a4 and a3 is clear, but also knight to d2 is just a good move. And this was not, well, this needed to happen here, I think. It was a bit of a big decision. I traded a very strong bishop here on e3 against the knight. But yeah, this is one of those moments you should not get emotionally attached to pieces that have done well for you. Because honestly, if I would be emotionally attached to the bishop, then my alternative is that I need to allow knight to c4 for now. And that knight is just very annoying for me. So if you trade the bishop for the knight, preventing knight to c4, then with the piece that black is left, he's clearly in a stronger position, so it is a good trade to make it. Although it was not not the easiest to do. a4, continuing with the idea of a3 on the next move, queen f2. And now let me actually first play the alternative that you might be thinking about, and that is the move b3. This is quite common pattern in kingside attacks, where for example the Sicilian, where black often plays a kingside attack on a castled king to white, and white attacks on the king side where black is castled. And what you see there a lot is a pattern of c takes b3. Actually, in this position I think you can also play c3. It looks quite okay, but just to show the point of what I see, see a lot in my games. is that after c takes b3, you get a takes, and now white just simply plays a3, and it uses the black b3 pawn as a defender of the white king. It's not so easy to get there. This is still an okay position for black, but it's just not as strong as the alternative, because after a3 you create luft or air for the white king, and this is well, honestly, this is a long-term advantage for as long as you have attacking pieces. This will be very annoying for white. Also, c3 is a very nice square for the black knights to come in the future. So we play king to b7. Multiple ideas here. First of all, we don't want the white queen to enter the black position through a7 in the future. The black king prevents that. And alternatively, we were talking already about the luft around the white king. And the best square for our black knight is clearly c3. Better than d4 even. So we want to reposition our knight to a7 to b5 to c3. Rook c1, preparing c3 or c4. Rook f7, preparing to push the passed pawn. c4, and there we push the passed pawn. This next move is actually interesting. So c5, which I didn't see. Perhaps it's a good idea, but with the pawn on c4, now white actually stops my earlier idea of repositioning my knight to c3, because I cannot go to a7 to b5, and of course if I ever step on d4, instantly the white knight, well, it's now kicked away, but in the future the white knight might try to get me away from there. So yeah, after c5, queen to f8 is just very, very okay. It has multiple purposes there. It supports the push again of the f3 pawn. It frees the black rook. The black rook now has the potential to go to the d file, and it keeps the c5 pawn in check. So yeah, knight to g3, and here, so we can play knight to d4, but we really don't want to, and the reason for that is twofold. First of all, we want our knight to end on c3, not on d4 necessarily, because c3 is just even better than d4. But you might say, oh, but you can also take the route through d4 to b5 to c3. Yes, you can, but the problem is you now get the move rook to c4. And yeah, now black has only two options. So my option is to lose that pawn, and I really do not want to lose the b4 pawn. Honestly, the position for black might still be playable, but the b4 pawn is so nicely annoying for